Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Hyde and I like to pretend I know stuff about cryptids. But today, I'm going to tell you why you should make ugly art. I've been making ugly art for a year now and it's helped me become a better artist. And if that doesn't sound right to you, let me paint you a word picture. Picture this, you're relaxed, sitting on your couch with some tea watching leaves outside your window swish gently in the breeze. When from the depths of your mind comes a genius, no, marvelous concept for the best piece of art you're ever going to produce thus far. Slaps the page, this bad boy can fit so much freaking art stuff in it. A cohesive color story, eye-catching composition, details upon details, the deepest depth of field, the best ever perspective, and a story that will inspire the masses. 2 hours later, you're sitting in front of your 10th blank piece of paper, pencil hovering in your shaking hand. You can't tell anymore if the drops on the paper are sweat or tears, but you know with despair in your heart that your concept will never be birthed into this corporeal plane the way it appears in your head. And then you give up. You pack up your art supplies and lock them in the closet for the rest of eternity because you know you'll never be as good at art as the other artists. Okay, probably not that dramatic, but about 1/10 of that is what we go through every time we put pressure on ourselves to make perfect art. And I know, please backspace right now if you're currently typing, well, that doesn't happen to me. Because trust me, I know it doesn't happen to everyone because everyone is different. Everyone responds to pressure differently and everyone's art journey is going to have a different path. That being said, everyone should draw ugly art. And you can't see me right now, but I'm putting air quotes around the word ugly because your art is not ugly, it just doesn't look the way you envision it. I can go on and on about how your art preferences affect the pressure that you put on yourself to perform at a certain skill level and how if your preferences for art exceed your skill level by too much, it can cause art block, which only goes away by practicing more, which means you have to stress yourself out until your art block goes away, and then your skill level and art preference only stay in the same range for a few months depending on the amount of practice you do, obviously, and then you get out of range again and the cycle begins anew. But we're not talking about that today. No, today I'm going to plead the case in 5 points why making ugly art is beneficial not only to your mental health, but to your art performance as a whole. Which brings me to my first point. Making ugly art helps you loosen up. Now this is important on 2 levels. First mentally and second physically. Both are not independent from each other in this case though. Where a warm-up is purely physical and helps your body warm up, a quick doodle or even just going into an art piece with the knowledge that you'll accept whatever quality comes out removes the pressure of needing to make a big elaborate art piece. Feeling that kind of pressure can cause anxiety and can cause you to become stiff, which leads to the physical part. If you're stiff, you're not making fluid motions that your body would naturally make, which means you're not making the line strokes that come naturally to your body. Your natural line strokes, as in the arcs and shapes that feel natural to you, specifically when you're drawing, are incredibly important to building your art style. Art style is a bigger topic that we can go over on a different video, but I have to mention as a person who used to be frozen in the I must make a perfect painting mindset, I feel like I've learned more about my art style in the past year of making ugly art than I have in my whole art journey. But back to those strokes. With smooth, confident strokes, your art will look more deliberate, which is a skill that most professional artists use in their art. By practicing ugly drawings with confident lines, you'll start to get a feel for which shapes you're capable of making naturally and eventually how to make them appealing to your eyes. Now that we're this far into the video, I feel like this is the time for a "your art is not ugly" checkpoint. As a reminder, your art is not ugly. You just think it is, but you won't think it's ugly forever. With time, your ugly art will develop into something that's familiar and comfortable for you to create. It will feel like an expression of yourself and less like an imitation of what you want to draw. And that's where point number 2 enters the game. Making ugly art is encouraging. And I can't deny it. I'll admit the first couple pieces are painful to look at, but that's what makes them so easy to move on from. If you're able to move on from one art piece, it's easy to jump to the next art piece without fear that you'll mess up the perfect piece you just did before. If you keep going, before you know it, you'll have a full sketchbook spread of ugly art pieces that for some reason look like they belong in the same family. Psst, this is your art style developing. And now that you have a full sketchbook spread of ugly art, you can color it with the most confidence in the world because you don't give a shit if you mess them up. Now here's a quick important side note. Making ugly art means that you let your most atrocious art pieces exist with your pretty art pieces. Don't start a new page or cover it up just because it makes your skin crawl. remember that your art is not ugly, it's not embarrassing, and it's not something to feel bad about. Let's get back to that sketchbook spread. Once you have one under your belt, well, it's just that easy to start another one, maybe even a themed one. And it goes by so fast. That's one of the beauties of ugly art. It's so fast to make, especially if you're using those confident strokes that feel comfortable to your hand. Who's going to spend 20 minutes forcing their hand to produce the perfect shape for a doodle when they can just let their hand produce whatever shape it wants in 1 second? Next thing you know, you feel productive because you are productive. And the cycle will continue, producing more art pieces faster, which means that you can experiment with all your ugly art confidently without fear of messing them up. Make your ugly art pieces your guinea pig and have fun with it. I can't tell you how many new rendering techniques I've discovered with my ugly art and how many pens I've accidentally killed with those experiments. Just remember, your ugly art is free to mess up, your art supplies are not. Please be careful and remember, wax-colored pencils will kill felt tip pens. Moving on to point number 3. Making ugly art helps the creative process, which in my mind is inspiration, design, creation, and reflection or presentation. The last part is depending on what your end goal is with your art. You will either have a piece that stays deep within the recesses of your sketchbook to reflect on, or you'll have a piece that is polished and ready to go up on your social media of choice for presentation to the masses. So how does making ugly art help with all those things? Starting with inspiration, we'll look back at something I touched on in the last point. Making ugly art is fast and produces lots of expendable art pieces to experiment on. Having free reign to experiment allows you to open your mind to every possible creative choice available, which leads to inspired ideas. Now for design, I've noticed it's easier to stylize pieces when I'm not worried about trying to make them look perfectly like the thing I'm drawing. But what about realism, you ask politely? To which I say, realism has a time and a place, but it definitely takes a backseat to action and feeling in art. Even if you want to draw a photorealistic lamp from reference, you'd probably benefit from making a couple ugly sketches of the lamp to understand the different components before going into the final piece. Figure drawing, it's all scribbles, like for the movement. Creation, reflection. When you look back on a piece of finished art, no matter how ugly, you still learn something for the next piece. I've noticed with my art that the more ugly the art is, the more glaringly obvious my mistakes are, which yes, is hard to look at, but allows me to take note and not make those mistakes as bad the next time. If you're concerned that I'm talking about learning in like the next month or a year, nope. It can be as soon as the next drawing, provided that you set your pencil down and force your sizzling eyes to look upon your ugly creation. Think of it as exposure therapy. Presentation is next, and I have to stress the most important part of successfully navigating this step is to keep your ugly art a secret. Yes, post it on social media, show your friends, add it to your webinar slideshow if you want, but don't tell anyone that you think it's ugly. And I can't stress this enough, do not point out the flaws. Doing this is like going on a date and telling your date how uncomfortable your wedgie is, or serving someone cake and then telling them that you dropped it on the floor as soon as they take a bite. There is art out there for everyone, and people will enjoy your ugly art even if you think it should be burned. You just have to give them space to make their own decisions about it. Positivity will bring positivity. Oh look, it's point number 4. Making ugly art helps cultivate a better relationship with your art. No, really. As you go down the path of your ugly art journey, you'll start to give yourself leeway on particularly ugly pieces and kudos when a piece doesn't turn out that bad. In the short term, you will learn to go easy on yourself when you're having a bad art day. In the long term, you'll learn to make shapes the way you want them and start to home in on your art style. And with growing confidence, you'll start to be proud of your art enough to post pieces on your social media if you're into that sort of thing. And if you're into that sort of thing, the likes and comments on your post will help reinforce your budding confidence. Eventually, you'll get confident enough to express new subjects and emotions with your art. That path tends to lead to a better understanding of what you want to say with your art and how you want to say it. And my final point to this is, making ugly art is fun. And that's definitely a subjective take, but this past year of making ugly art has been the most fun I've had with art in a very long time. The low to no pressure mindset of going into piece with no expectations and a I'm here to f it up attitude just unleashes my chaos gremlin. This kind of freedom with art seems to take away all the bad or nerve-wracking parts. There's no blank page anxiety or stress over the perfect line or even a heart-dropping moment when you think you've messed up on the perfect piece of art. It just allows your art to exist as is. And now with all that being said, I would like to encourage you to make your own ugly art, even if it lives in its own special sketchbook. Here's a quick little cliche to round this baby off. Stop being your own worst critic and start being your own worst hype man, or something like that. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one. Now go forth, my children, and make ugly art.